This meeting is being recorded.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We just celebrated Easter for some of us, and others have celebrated a week ago Passover, and many of us celebrated some new pink moon or something like that that's supposed to be rebirth and all that kind of stuff. And so I think, spring, Easter, Passover, even Eid are all about new beginnings. And I was introduced to a fascinating young lady who's gone through a really tough time. And she's spoken about it, and she's written about it, and she's published a book that's going to come out next month about it. And so I want to introduce you all to Lydia Knorr, who lost her husband, who got cancer, who lost her best friend of a dog as well, and through that all has found, as she described it, grace. And I love this. Grace stands for, get this, G for gratitude, R for resilience, A for awareness, C for connection, and E for evolution. I think this is going to be a really interesting Easter Monday, spring, rebirth conversation. Lydia, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Brian, and thank you especially for referring to me as a young lady.
You're welcome.
I certainly feel that way, when we talk about rebirth and next chapters and opportunities to take what your life experiences have given you and to grow more fully into who you are. That's really the impetus behind everything I do in terms of my speaking and my writing. It's about discovering more of who I am and why I'm here and how I'm meant to pay what I learned forward.
So you've gone through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The death of your husband, and I understand that you ended up having you had three young girls at the time, teenage girls at the time. So you ended up being a single mom with three teenage girls.
Yeah.
You am I correct to understand that you also had some challenges with alcohol?
I did. I definitely turned to wine as a means to quiet out the mind chatter and to fill some voids. Yeah, for a period of time that was far longer than it should have been.
And then you got cancer. And I presume, I hope that you're okay now, but you got cancer?
Yes. About a year and a half after my husband passed, I was diagnosed with a stage 3 thyroid cancer, and stage 3 because it had spread quite extensively into my neck. But yes, I'm fine. That was 10 years ago, and I'm healthy and happy and fit in every aspect of my life.
How'd you get through it all?
Oh, well, first and foremost, grief is not linear at all. Grief and trauma and illness, none of it, but I've always had a spirit of curiosity, Brian, from the time I was a little girl. I think I've always been a curious learner. I want to understand things. And as I grew older and had some of these really pivotal life moments affecting my life, I approached it from a place of, why is this happening for me versus rather than to me? So I never, ever have been a victim in any of my circumstances. I've always wanted to understand how I can create meaning from it. And when I do, I grow. I grow wiser.
What meaning is there in all these things happening to you?
Well, I mean, at the risk of sounding, I would never want to sound flippant because I do a lot of work in the grief and bereavement community and I have firsthand experience, but death is a part of life and it's inevitable. It's something we all have to accept at some point. I think my acceptance perhaps might have been easier than some because I've always believed prior to going through any of this. And I lost my dad 30 years ago too. So, I've lost all of the main men in my life, but I've always believed that when it's your time, and the circumstances are really irrelevant. So we all have to face it. It's nothing. Nobody gets to escape this. So there was a piece of me that always knew this is just what life is. Does it seem fair that it happened at the time in our lives that it didn't? No, but then I was also able to look at it from the point of view of, look at how much we did gain from the time we had with these people in our lives. So it's how you frame it.
So this framing of why is this happening for me versus why is this happening to me sounds really important. Tell me a little bit more about how you see that different.
Because when you look at it from that lens, Brian, you're open. You're open to learning and to understanding and to making meaning. I think when we close ourselves off from something, when we adapt a victim mentality, if you will, we're not open to growing from the experience. And I've always been about discovering more, understanding myself more, understanding people more, understanding the world more. So I can find my peace. I think that's what's helped me really find peace in this lifetime. And to me, peace is the Holy Grail.
So I always, found that, that line about, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger sort of flippant, but it sounds like you actually really believe it.
With 100% conviction. Yeah. I know it's a line that's overused. There's so many lines out there that people don't like hearing. One of the things that I know people don't like to hear when I'm speaking in the grief and bereavement community is that time really does heal. It gives you perspective and context, and it softens the grief. It never goes away, but it definitely does heal. There's no question. And people don't want to hear that when they're in the depths of it all. But I think it's a little bit of a beacon to hold on to, that with time, you will feel better.
So with time, all that hurt goes away.
It doesn't all go away, and you'll always have moments, but it's not as harsh and as difficult as it is in the beginning. Absolutely not. There's no question.
In my experience, some people just dwell on things that happened to them for a long, long time. That if they were raped, or if they lost their job, or if they got divorced, or whatever that instance is, it sort of defines them and changes them, and it becomes who they are. And so maybe it's this idea of the victim scenario, but it's they dwell on it forever. So how did you not fall into that?
That's a really interesting question, because as I'm listening to you pose it, there's a part of me that has very much connected my life and my story to being a widow, but I don't dwell in it. Although I recognize as well, there's something maybe holding me back still from doing even bigger, greater things, because I identify with it. I identify I'm a widow. That's one of the first things I say when I talk to people about, what's your backstory? But really, in essence, yes, I've been widowed, but that's not who I am. In fact, I'm so many different, better, greater, other things because of it, not, or despite it. So I don't know what the answer is to dwelling in. I would say, from my experience, Brian, and we hear this not just about grief and about divorce, it's about mental health in general, just getting support for what you need. So when you're struggling through something, I really think it's important to connect with community, resources, whatever, to get yourself out of that mental headspace, because it really is, it's a space that you're in, and it's a mindset. And people hear this term again, another one people don't like, mindset, positive mindset. How do you get there? You get help. I write about this in my book, versus it's being in, there's two forms of action, denial and resilience. And are they the same, or are they different? They're both a form of action, but denial is almost like not taking action. And cultivating resilience is about taking action. Just get yourself through these really tough moments. And that's how you forge that resilience and build it. So I think it's about not going it alone, which I did for a lot of years too. So this is all lessons learned along the way.
And it sounds like you went it alone with wine for a while. And so that's probably another story. But let me come to the book if I could. The book is called, and it's being published in May, Hello, Grace. The road from heartbreak to healing is paved with grace. And, grace is an interesting word. And a lot of people, frankly, a lot of people would have talked about grace this weekend at church and things like that. It's it's sort of a religious, spiritual concept. Grace, the way that you've defined it, is different. I think you say grace transforms our hardships, giving them meaning and encouraging us to live full and fulfilling lives in spite of the difficulties we encounter. What is grace?
Grace is, as you shared at the beginning of this discussion, it's, for me, it is the 5 pillars that really guided my journey through being widowed, through having cancer, through unhealthy coping. It was remembering that at the forefront of everything is gratitude, to always be grateful, even in the tough times. That's when it's the most important time to find grace and gratitude, because that reminds us that we're here, that we're alive, that we have another shot at a day of humanity. And even though, and I think you and I've talked about this previously outside of this, it's knowing that, you can be experiencing two things at once that feel very opposite. And people will say grief and gratitude can't coexist, but I completely disagree. I feel there's room. They both connect us to our hearts. They both embody our humanity. And so therefore they do coexist, and we have to find a way to make room for both. And the key for me was to let both flow equally in equal measure, not to feel bad when I was grateful or happy about something, even though I was still deeply grieving, and not to, disencourage myself or discourage myself from feeling those sad feelings when I needed to feel them. Because, you don't sit in one state of being for an entire day. Everything flows. You'll have your moments of hardship, and then you'll have your moments of happiness. And that's the human experience, letting it all flow through you and hoping that one day the gratitude will outweigh its adversary, the grief. And it does. It does. The more you can find the good and the grace, it will overcome the hardship.
So even though you're missing him terribly and the life that you had together, you're grateful for that time that you had together. Is that what you're saying?
So much more grateful for the time we had together than missing him for not being here as a part of it. He's always a part of it forever, through my children, through our memories. So I get to have that, and I'm very fortunate to be able to have that and to be able to say that I have nothing but happy memories.
This is a very powerful story that you've got, and a very powerful book, I can imagine. I'm looking forward to reading it, and it's wonderful that you're open to sharing it, because so many people, everybody, goes through grief at some point in time in their life, and has loss, suffers from loss, and a lot of us don't know how to deal with it. And whether it's losing someone, and lots of us have lost. Everyone's lost parents and grandparents, and but spouses. I've lost a spouse through a divorce. You've lost a spouse through death. It's a difficult thing to deal with, and I think your several different pillars, as you've described, I think are extremely helpful.
Yeah.
The last one I found difficult to understand, though. Evolution.
Okay.
What do you mean by evolution? What's evolution? Evolution to me is Darwin and monkeys becoming humans. What's evolution in your mind?
A little simpler. It's evolving more fully into who you are. It's just diving more deeply into yourself, being more connected by knowing yourself, understanding who you are, what your triggers are, what you need to support yourself on your well-being journey. It's just really knowing you and feeling confident and strong in that, and then taking what you've learned and paying it forward.
So,
which is why I do the work I do.
Sorry, lots of people talk about how you've got to find meaning in life, and there's that. Oh gosh, I can't think about it right now. But that author that wrote about the concentration camps, and that even in the worst possible situation, if you found meaning in your life and purpose in your life, you could get through almost anything. Is that sort of what you're talking about?
Yes, absolutely, spot on.
We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in just 2 minutes. And we're going to ask our guest if she'll open up and tell us a little bit about what actually happened. Because I think that, knowing the details, which I think she talks about in her book and she talks about in some of her grief counseling, is something that a lot of people are going to be curious about. And I think it's going to ground us in how she then ultimately got through it. Stay with us, everyone. We're going to be back in just 2 minutes with Lydia Knorr, talking about grace and getting through some of the worst things that life can throw at you. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes.
This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I thought it would be really interesting on Easter Monday. Not everyone celebrates Easter Monday, but on Easter Monday, since several of us have gone through Easter this past weekend, and a weekend ago, many of us went through Passover, and I guess 3 weeks ago, some of us went through Eid, and so the whole religious communities have gone through sort of this process of thinking about rebirth and the future, and spring is in the air, and so I think that it's helpful thinking about rebirth and the future. And I was introduced to Lydia Knorr, who's suffered a lot and has got through it, and got through it in an incredible way, and has written a book about it. It's going to get published in May. She works with the grief community and bereavement community, and does podcasts and speeches to them, and she's sharing today with us her story, and it's quite the story. Lydia, what happened? Can you tell us a little bit? I know it must be difficult, but if you could, your husband passed away and on a trip, business trip. Tell us if you could what happened. Was there warnings? Was he sick? Was he unhealthy? Can you share with us
No.
what's going on?
No, not sick at all. Very healthy. Although I will say he'd been burning the candle at both ends for quite some time. His job demanded a lot of travel, and most of that was overseas, China, where the manufacturing for his company's products were. So he was doing a lot of traveling, and over time, I could see his energy waning. I could see the toll that was taking on him. And on one Sunday afternoon, actually, I'm going to backtrack to the night before. We were at a function, a fundraiser for one of our daughter's sports teams, and it was in a large hall. And I remember walking out to the ladies' room and coming back in, and I looked clear across the room, and I saw this man crossing the room, and I had to do a double take because I realized it was my husband. And I thought, oh my God, he's just aging before my eyes. And I'd been watching this, and it just really took me aback. And the next morning, when I dropped him off at the airport for this 5-day whirlwind trip to China, I said, I'm worried about you. You're aging before my eyes, and I don't like this. This job is too much. And he squeezed my hand, Brian, with this tired smile on his face that I'd grown accustomed to seeing. And he said, I'll see you Friday. And I just shook my head. I thought, 5 days, this is crazy. Anyway, I remember watching him walk away in my rearview mirror, and his shoulders were slumped forward. And I felt such a pit in my stomach, but I thought, what can I do? Like, this is his life and this is his choice. 3 days later, my phone rang, and it was 3:00 in the morning. And I saw the name of his boss, on the caller ID. And right away, I knew something terrible had happened. I thought for sure he'd had a heart attack. And I picked up the phone, and I didn't even say hello. I just said, Pete, what's going on? And I heard him just sort of choke. And then he said, we don't know what happened, but Mike is dead. And immediately I knew that it was probably related to the way the Chinese conduct themselves in business, which Mike hated. And he'd been forewarned that it was going to be a tough go over. There's a custom called Crombie, and they drink a product called Baijiu, and it's basically shot for shot, and whoever's sort of the last man standing. I don't know if it ever gets to that point.
We're going to have to take...
Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
We lost you there for a second, Lydia. Please, I apologize. Really an important time. So you got this call at 3:00 in the morning. That must have been just terrible.
Devastating, actually. And because it was 3:00 in the morning, Brian, I just, there was no point in waking up the rest of my world to let them know what difference was that going to make. So I needed to sit with this news for a little bit and digest it. So my immediate instinct was just to crawl over to his side of the bed and wrap myself up tightly in the sheets so I could feel him with me. And I did. And I had this cascade of memories flood over me from our 20-year marriage and the excitement we had at building this life together and the life we did create with our 3 daughters. And I was grateful. I was so grateful in that moment of devastation. So back to my point earlier about, grief and gratitude can coexist. But for me, being able to feel gratitude right then and there, I knew there was something bigger at work in my life. I'm
sorry, how could you feel grateful? Most people would be like thumping their fists and saying, why me? Why me? Why the blank me? How could you be feeling grateful?
I was grateful for the life we created. I was grateful that those memories were like flooding over me in that moment. I really felt that was his energy at work in my life. Bigger energy. I knew that there was somebody helping me along here to see all the good in this moment of devastation. And I knew that it was going to be a hard road. I knew that I would be supported so fully for the first little while. And then once people's lives went back to what they were, it would be a hard road. And I had no idea what their road was going to look like. But because I got that glimpse, that taste of gratitude so early on, I just held on to that like that was everything. And I knew I needed to keep carving out moments of being grateful, finding gratitude. And there were so many because he was an amazing human being, a wonderful father, incredible husband, wonderful friend, family man. So there was so much to be grateful for just knowing him and just having had the experience of being in his life for as long as I had been.
Tell me how difficult it was at breakfast with the girls.
Well, I called my mom to come over and just support me, just sit with me for a little while until I woke the girls up for school, or what time they would get up for school. And I had a little tradition of, my youngest one was quite small at the time, so I guess to pick her up in her sleepy state, and she'd wrap her arms and legs around me, and I'd take her down the stairs for breakfast. And that morning we did the same, except I didn't go downstairs. I opened the door to her sister's bedroom. And the girls said, why didn't you get us up for school, Mom? And I just sat down on one of their beds and with tears in my eyes, and I said, I have to tell you something. And from that day forward, our grief just took on so many different forms, and everybody navigated very individually, very separately, very differently. And I think we just really relied on our friend groups and our family to support us through that time. It was 8 days before his body was flown home from China. So I had all that time just to sit with it and receive people and receive support, which was beautiful. I've never felt more supported in my life. But yeah, it was a challenge for sure. And of course, it was a challenge, as we talked about, some of my coping mechanisms were not the best and the healthiest, and that definitely affected my family. They'd already lost the most stable part of our home by, losing their dad, and I wasn't always present for them. So that's a massive regret. I don't have a lot of regrets looking back on my life because the growth has been phenomenal, but if I could turn the clock back on one part of my life, that would be it, for sure.
Can you tell us more about that? How did that happen? Did you had challenges with alcohol previously? Was this just something that sort of happened, and why?
Yeah.
It seems so strong. Why was it alcohol that was the support mechanism?
I don't know, Brian. That's a question I've asked myself a lot of times because I have a background in health, in nutrition. I understand the science of how chemicals work in your body and how they can become addictive. I know all of that. I have the knowledge. I certainly have the fortitude and strength to go through a lot of hard things and navigate them. I don't know. We were always social drinkers. I mean, we definitely enjoyed our weekends. We were a ski family. We did the whole après ski thing. We definitely enjoyed, but it turned to something that just became a crutch for me. And I think it had several purposes for me. One was to quiet the mind chatter, because my mind only ever went to two places in the beginning. It was to what I had lost, to the past, and to what was unknown to me in the future. And I couldn't sit in stillness. And it was just a way of quieting my mind chatter, filling a void, filling space in the quietness of the evenings. It was a lot of things. It wasn't one, but no one of those reasons were good ones.
And what, you would drink till you passed out, or what?
Sometimes, or it would be, maybe I would be going over to friends. Like we had a very tight a core group of friends at the time that were very, very supportive of me, but it would be dinners that just went very late and copious amounts of wine and people supporting me getting home. It's not an admission that I'm proud of, but yeah, it would just get to a point where, I wasn't in a healthy state.
And then what, sometime after this, you also got cancer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What happened there? Tell me about that. And how did you, like blank, how did you deal with this too?
Well, the cancer, the diagnosis was definitely a surprise, but we had been, I was alerted to something wrong, in the area of my neck, probably about 6 months before Mike died. And just, with our healthcare system being what it is, it's nothing that's critical. So I just had a 5 or 6 month waiting list to see a specialist. And then once I saw a specialist, we started going down the path of taking biopsies, and we were having some challenges getting any clean results from those biopsies for different reasons. So it probably took another 8 or 9 months for me to get a diagnosis. And when I did, I was very much assured from my doctors that, this is very manageable. It's a very contained cancer. We're going to do surgery. We'll do a treatment afterwards, and you should be fine. The problem was that they couldn't get a clean biopsy, so they started searching a little further up away from the thyroid, which is what they were proposing was cancerous. And they took from a lymph node halfway up my neck a sample, and they determined that it was cancerous. So that meant that the cancer had spread into my neck. So it ended up being quite an extensive surgery. I think, initially they were suggesting 3 or 4 hours and then treatment following. I was on the table for 8 hours. And I remember my
8 hours.
sister was waiting for me. And when the surgeon came out, she said, "What took so long?" And he said, "Well, we were in some delicate territory there, the vocal cords, the jugular vein. There's a lot of delicate stuff around there. So we had to take our time, but it was, she's fine." And so I was fine until blood work about 9 months later suggested more trace of cancer. So I went in for a second surgery, second round of treatment.
Surgery.
Yeah. Yeah. And another round of treatment. And at that point, they were quite certain that it was completely gone. And they were right, because I'm 10 years later and I'm fine.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Your girls must have been going through a harrowing time there, thinking about the risk to their mom after they had lost their father.
No, actually, Brian, no, because I was partly confident, or I was very confident in my healthcare team and in the story that I was being told by my healthcare team that this is really a very treatable cancer and you will be fine. Even though I will say, once I got the diagnosis again that there was more cancer and I needed a second surgery, that's when I started hunkering down and doing some homework and saying, okay, what's going on here? Why has this come back? What do I need to know? And I started reading and getting a little bit nervous about what I was reading, because once it's spread that far, it's considered a stage 2 to 3 cancer with potentially a 50% survival rate beyond 5 years. And at that point, I thought, okay, I have a young family. I need to understand this better. My specialist assured me that that was a little bit dated, that information, and that the way they treated cancer now, this particular type of cancer, it was very rare that it would reoccur, and that it would spread anywhere else. He told me that the likelihood is that I'd had it for a very long time and it was extremely slow growing. So the fact that we were getting all of it now, I should be fine. And as I said, I have been. So I downplayed it a lot for my kids, because we had just been through, it was only a year and a half after their dad died. We'd been through a lot, and I downplayed it. And I think, put it this way, had he not died and I had this diagnosis, it would have been a bigger deal in my life. But again, I'm not a victim. So I just said, do this, get through it, you'll be fine. You have to be fine. And I remember having a very specific moment with my late husband when I got the diagnosis, and I said, I'm not ready to be with you yet. I'm not. It's just, I've got too much left here to do, and our kids need me. And that was, again, the decision too, with getting my act together,
for them,
all of that.
And was that part of what got you through the alcohol problem, wanting to be there for your kids?
Yeah. And of course, my own health too. I've just had cancer, right? So take better care of yourself.
So how did you get through that? Did you go on to rehab? Did you do cold turkey? What's the solution there?
No, totally cold turkey. Brian,
you just woke up one day and say, no more? That's it?
Literally, I'm going to tell you exactly how it went down, because I would have these conversations in my mind, like, you need to do better. You are better than this. And it's not a judgment on people who have an addiction. I'm just saying that I know that I have so many gifts that I want to share with the world. And this is like that one dark cloud hanging over my head. So just step out from under it. I knew it wouldn't take a rock bottom moment. I knew it wouldn't take something catastrophic. In fact, what it took was a conversation with a really good friend. And we were at their cottage, my daughters and I, their daughters, very, very good friends. And we were all having some drinks over dinner and whatever, but I was just watching my daughters watch me. And I could feel the elephant in the room. I could feel the tension. Even though everybody was fine, I was coherent. There was no over drinking. And so the kids were cleaning up after dinner, and I went down to the dock to talk to my friends. And I said, this is what I've observed. And I really think I need to take some action here, because I just sense once the girls are old enough to be on their own, they're not going to want to have a lot to do with me, just based on what I'm feeling here. And she looked at me and she said, if that's what you're really feeling, like, Lydia, if that's what you believe, you got to get your act together. And it was as simple as that, Brian. I was ready to hear, and it wasn't anything I hadn't told myself 100 times over. But I went to bed that night, and I remember just, sighing and laying awake for much of the evening. And I woke up the next morning and I said, that's it. I didn't say anything to anybody. I didn't make any declarations, but I didn't touch a drink for 2 years after that.
Wow. Having that friend that gives you the tough love sometimes is critically important too.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you really feel. You
Yeah.
got to get your act together.
Yeah. And she apologized the next day for being tough on me. I said, don't you dare. I said, you just did what a good friend would do. Right. So I love that. And I love her for it. And I didn't tell her.
It is interesting that, sometimes that's at the wrong time, but sometimes at the right time. And so I think a good friend knows when it's the right time.
Yes. Yes. And that is that dives into that whole, C in grace, which is connection, and having those right people in our lives and those support systems and people who know when to give you that soft push, the nudge, or to really kick you hard in the butt, or just to stay quiet, but we do need people in our lives. We can't do it alone.
Well, that's a great segue into going from the story of what happened to now the book and what you want to say and how you want to influence people and these pillars of the word grace. So why don't we take a break? And when we come back, we're going to ask Lydia to change and talk us through each one of these pillars that are part of her podcast, of her keynote speeches, and of her a book about grace. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes with Lydia Knorr talking about this incredible challenges that she's gone through that have led her to where she is and writing a book. And maybe I'll start out by saying what motivated you to decide to take this incredible story and put it to paper. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes.
This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're chatting. This is actually not a chat. We are having a very interesting, deep conversation tonight with Lydia Knorr about the death of her husband, about her drinking, about her cancer diagnosis, and then 2 cancer surgeries. We're talking about her challenge with wanting to do better for her children and better for herself, and getting through it all, and then deciding to speak about it and write a book. And so, Lydia, why did you decide to write a book and sort of open up to the world about everything you've gone through?
I've always believed that sharing our stories creates moments of connection through, people seeing themselves in someone else's story. And I've always known I wanted to write a book. And these stories that I had, once I was able to navigate them and find meaning and find my own personal growth through them and strength, I knew that they needed to be shared, because somewhere inside of one of my stories in this book, somebody will see themselves and take away something from it.
And it comes out in May?
May 27th.
I look forward to it. The grace that you've defined has 5 tenets to it. Gratitude. Tell me a little bit more about gratitude. And I find it amazing that you had gratitude that very first night at 3:00 in the morning. But tell me a little bit more about what exactly you do, if anything, to focus in on gratitude.
Well, I have several practices. One is journaling. So every day I write down 3 things I'm grateful for, whether it's something that I experienced the day before or something I'm looking forward to in the day, or whether it's just the simple fact that I get to wake up and take a full, deep lungful of air and see the sun shining outside. There's always something to be grateful for. So I make a point of acknowledging that.
You find that journaling and writing it down helps?
Absolutely. I've been journaling from the get-go for more than a decade. My journaling has shifted, in different ways. Initially, it was a bit of therapy for me. I just got to put down my feelings and what I was experiencing. But now my gratitude journal is key. And also it goes along with gratitude as well. I have another journal that I write in every couple of months, and it's looking at my life from my older, wiser self versus, we always hear, what would you tell your younger self? But I write a journal from my older, wiser self to me today to remind me of all of the good things I'm doing, because we can always, all of us can get down on ourselves and challenge ourselves and sometimes question, whether we're meeting our goals and living our best lives and doing all we can be doing. So I make sure that I check in with myself from another place and remind me that I'm doing great.
I pray every night, and I'm a religious person, but not overly religious. But I do pray, and my prayer is sort of more really frankly, it's like a meditation, because I recite a prayer, but then I talk to myself and whoever else it is I'm talking to. I hope it's God, and I always talk about some of the things that I'm grateful for and thankful for, and my kids are one of those things that I mention every night. I find that helpful, and it's kind of a routine that I like. It's a sort of a ceremony with myself that I like. But I do find that it makes me restful and gets to sleep faster and changes my attitude.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think that's beautiful. And to me, that's what prayer is too. I grew up going to church, and I'm a fully, I believe in God, and that's what prayer is to me. It's giving thanks. It's expressing your gratitude for all the gifts that you have in your life, and for being given the gift of life.
When my family was growing up and we would have dinners for Thanksgiving, we would go around the table and everyone would say what we were thankful for. We've dropped that. And that's probably a mistake. And we've
Wow.
lost that. And we probably didn't do it often enough. Resilience is the second. Tell me, people talk a lot about resilience, and then other people talk about, it's pivoting, because if some people thought resilience was knocking your head against a concrete wall over and over and over and over again until you got it done. So it was sort of like persistence. And other people then said, no, you got to pivot. So how do you define resilience?
Oh, all of those ways. I think resilience is being able to take your knocks and pick yourself up and dust yourself off and try again. I think resilience is trusting that it will all work out. I think resilience is knowing that this is meant to teach you something more. There's a reason that you're taking these knocks. And I think resilience is really found oftentimes, it's not exactly in the word, but when I look at the word resilience, you can almost see the word silence in there, and it's sitting with whatever it is you're experiencing and just sitting with it and finding some semblance of meaning through it. And then understanding that when you did take that knock and you got back up again to face another day, and that's you cultivating it. It's not something that you wake up with one day and you say, I'm resilient. It's like it's fostered over time, right?
That's interesting. I'd never seen silence in resilience before. So just
it's not exact, but yeah, just sit with it.
I like
and again,
sorry?
I was just going to say again, all those things, we talked about, just what is this meant to teach me, right? And I think when you can create meaning from something, like truly not just telling yourself a story, this happened because it was his time. I mean, I do believe that. But this was a catalyst to awakening me to discovering a lot more about who I am.
I like your comment about trusting that things will work out. I think that's, it's sort of confidence, it's self-confidence, it's knowing things are going to work out.
Everything always does.
Do you believe that? Do you really believe that? Everything
I do. I do. I believe that because as long as you can find meaning and growth through your experiences, whatever they are, then it's worked out because you found something good.
That's a great attitude. I've had some challenges myself, nothing like yours, but I've had some challenges myself in my life. And at times I've worried about whether they would work out. I've been really struggling, and that's great. And I've had to put that sign on my wall about what I was hoping would happen. And they didn't work out exactly the way I wanted them to, but I guess you're right. They sort of worked out in the end. Awareness. What's awareness to you?
Awareness is understanding yourself in terms of how you process feelings. Why do I feel the way I do? Why is this landing for me this way? What's going on with me that I'm feeling this way? And also awareness for how other people receive you. Having that ability to understand how others look at you too, and not in the egotistical sense of I need to show up a certain way to impress people, but rather I need to show up with integrity, for others as well.
I guess that speaks to you seeing how your daughters were looking at you, watching you, and you wanted to be different for them.
Absolutely. Different for them and different for me, And it starts with self, right? It's wanting, I talk to people about this often, not necessarily in my grief work, but just about love for self. And, we're raised in a culture or society that seems to think that's selfish. And I think the absolute opposite. I think when you do the work and you do the things like reflect and look at yourself and how you're conducting yourself, and am I happy with who I am as a person? When you can look at yourself at the end of the day in the mirror and say, am I proud of who's looking back at me? That's the awareness piece. And it starts with you. And that's loving yourself. And it's loving yourself. When you forgive yourself for your past transgressions and things that you can't change that are in the past, it starts with you. I heard something once about forgiveness is like setting a prisoner free and realizing that prisoner is you. So
forgiveness is setting a prisoner.
It's like setting a prisoner free and
realizing that prisoner is you.
Yeah.
Well, lots of people actually, that's fascinating, because lots of people are saying forgiving someone isn't for them; it's for you. It benefits you.
It's absolutely for you, because you're only holding on to negative energy, if you're not forgiving someone. So you need to if you can let that go, you'll realize the peace you feel.
I don't know. So many people just can't let things go.
I know.
They harbor it. They dwell on it. It consumes them forever and ever. And you're right.
They just haven't.
If they haven't learned the forgiving, it would benefit them as much, if not more, than the person they are actually forgiving. Connection.
Yes.
Grace is gratitude, resilience, awareness, connection, and evolution. Tell me about connection.
Connection to everything and all things. First of all, the obvious connection to other people, but next to, I think they say next to food, water, and shelter, which are our most basic of human needs, connection is our fourth fundamental human need. And, as we've talked about, it's the value in having people in your life, whether it's to give you a nudge or whether it's to sit silent with you and hold your hand. Connection is fundamental, but it's also connection to other things. As I mentioned in the beginning, feeling that gratitude really connected me to something bigger than me. And I coveted that relationship. I worked hard at deepening my spiritual connections and my connection to God and to what I couldn't see, and my believability in something bigger than me.
And then the last one is evolution.
Mm-hmm. All of it culminates for you to evolve, for you to grow, to understand yourself better, to become stronger, wiser, kinder, more compassionate, just the best version of yourself you can be. That's evolution.
She learned to live with grace, gratitude, resilience, awareness, connection, and evolution as she navigated through the sadness, fear, and uncertainty of what lay ahead. Hello, Grace celebrates the everyday blessings that demand we let life in, all of it, so we can experience what it means to be fully alive. Fantastic. We're going to take a break. Actually, do you have something from your book that you could read for us? Why don't we take a break? When we come back, why don't we close with a reading from the book, Hello, Grace. The road from heartbreak to healing is paved with grace. Back in 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody.
This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Bar. We're chatting tonight with Lydia Knorr, talking about her book, Hello, Grace, from heartbreak to solving all of her problems. It's a book that's going to be released in May. Lydia, could you read something from the book for us, please?
Yes, for sure. All right. I first heard the word lifey when I was asking a friend how she was feeling and healing after some invasive surgery. She was very positive about it all. And when I commended her, she said, life is lifey and all very beautiful in so many ways. Immediately, I looked up the word in the dictionary and it said, lifey is full of life or spirited, denoting a positivity about life. But full of life also means experiencing the fullness of life. And I know this is what my friend meant when she said that. Lifey implies wisdom. It suggests that to live life to its fullest, we need to embrace all of it. The ups, the downs, the happiness, the heartbreaks, the smooth sailing, the turbulent waters. We need to be willing to accept life exactly as it is and to recognize it as something that all of us as human beings have to experience. The stories I share in this book align with the notion of lifey. As my friend would say, it's awakening to a new way of being after pain. It's cultivating resilience through the chaos of life. It's forging connections that strengthen our resolve and learning from those experiences. This is how transformation unfolds. By choosing to see every moment, every challenge, every triumph as integral parts of our journey, we awaken to the reality that nothing is wasted. Each experience belongs to us equally, contributing to a more profound understanding of who we are and what we're capable of. This awakening opens the door to a greater capacity for love, compassion, and makes us more grateful. And grateful living is what makes life lifey and beautiful in so many ways.
Lifey. Never heard that
Life
word
is
before.
lifey. I hadn't either, and I loved it so much, but it's a real word.
So living life to its fullest and accepting all the pros and cons, the ups, the downs.
Yeah. There's a great poem by the Persian poet Rumi, and it's called The Guest House. And I actually include that in that chapter. I just didn't say it here, but it's phenomenal. It's really about inviting everyone in, regardless of who they are, because they have a place at your table.
I just the other day, someone sent me a video of a symphony, of an opera that talks about exactly this as well. I'm going to have to go back and find that and
Okay.
and let you know about it. Are you excited about releasing the book?
I'm ecstatic. It's, it's interesting. You spend this, I wrote it in a very short amount of time, 6 months. So, that was my full-time focus for 6 months. And then you hand it off and it's like handing your baby off to university. It's like, now it's in the hands of someone else, but it's in such trustworthy hands. And we've had such a great experience working together. And yeah, it still feels a little bit surreal, but it's going to be one of my proudest experiences for sure.
Have your daughters read it? What do they think of it?
They haven't read it all. I have shared a lot of the chapters with them, but they've also contributed a chapter each. And I told them, you speak about whatever you want to speak on. So they're all really wonderful chapters. They're all very, very different. Some a little more joyful, some a little more painful, but they all add so much value and layers to the book. So I'm really proud of them.
Give me a sense, if you could, of what they may have said.
My oldest daughter speaks of the challenge of not feeling like she had any parents for a while, really feeling like she had to take on the role of protecting her sisters through their emotional hardship and having to stuff down what she was feeling. And that's the context of her chapter. It's about evolution, how she grew through it, the awareness she found in herself. One of my other daughters speaks of just what it was like growing up, seeing a team effort approach between her two parents and how much it fostered, what she looks for in her own life and how she shows up for people. She really respected what we forged and created. And then the youngest speaks very much about what it was like growing up with two killer older sisters who just really set her on a path. So they're all very different.
Did that friend that spoke to you on the dock read it? What would she think about where you are today?
Oh, she's so proud of me. She's a big cheerleader for sure.
Well, I think that's, maybe it's connection. But I think that's one of the keys to success in life as well, is having a cheerleader or two. So, just having connections is helpful, but having a cheerleader is pretty damn important.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of them in my life.
And having that person that speaks truth, because sometimes we need it and sometimes we don't listen to it. But when we're ready to listen to it, that ends up being critically helpful and important.
And that is key. You need to be ready to make the changes in your life. If there are changes that needed to be made, you need to be aware and ready and willing.
It sounds like really what you went through is a journey, and maybe that's your evolution comment, because you were grateful that very first night, but it took a couple of years before you got through it all. And it wasn't, as you say, grief and grieving. It was just sort of the process that you needed to go through to become that version of yourself that you are today. Tell me, what's the future? Are you who you want to be today?
Yeah. And now what I would really like to do with what I know and what I've discovered in myself is encourage people to find that for themselves too.
Now, you do speaking on nutrition as well. Tell me, if people want to follow you, they want to register for your book, is there a website that they can go to check out your health and nutrition stuff, or your book, or how do they follow you?
I'm not actually practicing anymore as a dietitian. I left that career altogether. So I'm focused mostly on focused on motivational speaking and getting my book out there in front of people. So people can register to pre-order the book at hellograce.ca. And they can follow me on my website, which is existing, but it's going to go under a complete re-edit in a couple of weeks' time. It's called lydiaknorr.com.
Lydia Knorr, thank you so much for joining us and telling us a little bit about Grace. And I got to tell you, I love the 5 elements, and I love the story. I hate the story, but I love the story because the fact that you got through it all and that it made you who you are today, and it's the truth. I as I mentioned, I've gone through a divorce, and so it wasn't a death, but it feels like it at times. And I've lost my mother recently, who was one of the most important people in my life. And that's the story that everyone goes through, isn't it? Everyone goes through these kinds of losses, whether it be death or divorce or separations or loss of friends or loss of jobs or whatever it is. And I think that your ideas of how to get through it are critically important. And I love the idea of grace. So thank you so much for joining us
Here's,
and motivating us and inspiring us to think about the future, which is what we all got to think about. So thank you.
you are very welcome. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining me. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 a.m. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videos go up on YouTube and my website, briancrombie.com, and on social media and on podcast servers as soon as the radio show goes to air so that you can come back and listen to them again if you so are interested. Wow. What a story. I only hope that if I went through half of what Lydia went through, I'd be able to deal with it half as well as she has and be there for my children. Because that's something that I think we all want to do in life. Good night, everybody.